Have you ever stopped to consider the number of wars the United States has been involved in since 1980? It's a thought-provoking question, isn't it? And it's one that leads us down a fascinating path of history, filled with conflict, resolution, and the relentless march of time. Our journey is about to start, taking us on a roller coaster ride through decades of military endeavors. So buckle up, history enthusiasts, as we turn back the clock. Let's dive into the past, beginning with the year 1980. The decade of 1980 started with the Operation Eagle Claw. This was a secret mission, a daring rescue attempt by the United States to free 52 American hostages held captive in Iran. The mission, unfortunately, was not successful. A series of mechanical failures and unexpected weather conditions led to its tragic end, resulting in the loss of 8 American lives. This event highlighted the need for the U.S. to upgrade its special operations capabilities, which led to the creation of the U.S. Special Operations Command. Moving on from the deserts of Iran, we find ourselves in the tropical paradise of Grenada in 1983. But it was not a vacation that brought the U.S. military to this Caribbean island. Rather, it was a power struggle within the Grenadian government that led to the execution of the Prime Minister and the concern that American medical students might be in danger. The U.S. launched Operation Urgent Fury, an invasion that lasted for just over a week. The swift victory achieved by the U.S. marked the first major military operation since the Vietnam War. The decade ended with the U.S. military once again in action, this time in Central America. In 1989, the U.S. launched Operation Just Cause, an invasion of Panama with the objective of ousting its leader, Manuel Noriega, who had been charged with drug trafficking in the U.S. The operation was a success, with Noriega captured and later convicted. The 1980s were a decade of significant military actions for the United States, each with their own unique motivations and outcomes. From failed rescue attempts in Iran that led to an overhaul of special operations, to successful invasions in Grenada and Panama that demonstrated American military power. These events shaped the U.S.'s approach to international conflicts and set the stage for the military actions that would follow in the coming decades. As we move into the 90s, the U.S. continues its global military involvement. The 90s saw the U.S. involved in several international conflicts, starting with the Gulf War. This war, also known as Operation Desert Storm, came about when Iraq, led by Saddam Hussein, invaded Kuwait in August of 1990. The United States, along with a coalition of 34 other nations, stepped in to liberate Kuwait, viewing Iraq's aggressive actions as a threat to global security. The Gulf War was marked by extensive use of technology and precision weaponry. It was a major victory for the coalition, effectively pushing back the Iraqi forces out of Kuwait by February of 1991. However, it left Saddam Hussein's regime intact, setting the stage for future conflicts. Next, we have the U.S.-led humanitarian mission in Somalia, which began in 1992. Famine and civil war were ravaging this East African nation, and the world watched in horror as images of starving children filled the news. The mission, known as Operation Restore Hope, aimed to create a safe environment for aid delivery. Despite initial successes, the mission turned tragic when 18 U.S. soldiers were killed in what's now known as the Battle of Mogadishu. Finally, there's the intervention in Bosnia in the mid-90s. The Bosnian War was characterized by ethnic cleansing and brutal atrocities that shocked the world. The U.S., under the banner of NATO, initiated airstrikes to end the Serb aggression and later helped broker the Dayton Peace Agreement, effectively ending the war. Each of these conflicts had different reasons for U.S. involvement. The Gulf War was about protecting global interests, Somalia was a humanitarian mission gone awry, and Bosnia was an intervention to stop atrocities. The outcomes varied too: a swift victory in the Gulf War, a tragic turn of events in Somalia, and a hard-fought peace in Bosnia. Moving into the new millennium, the world changes, and so does the nature of the U.S.'s involvement in conflicts. The dawn of the new millennium saw the U.S. drawn into long-term conflicts in Afghanistan and Iraq. On the heels of the devastating September 11th attacks in 2001, the United States, under the leadership of President George W. Bush, launched Operation Enduring Freedom in Afghanistan. The primary objective was to dismantle al-Qaeda, the terrorist organization responsible for the attacks, and to remove the Taliban regime that was providing them shelter. This marked the beginning of America's longest war that spanned over 2 decades. The invasion of Afghanistan was initially met with international support. However, the war's complexities soon became evident. The mountainous terrains, tribal politics, and the resilient Taliban fighters proved to be significant challenges. The United States and its allies found themselves embroiled in a protracted conflict with no easy exit. Simultaneously, another conflict was brewing in the Middle East. In 2003, the United States, in a coalition with the United Kingdom and other allies, initiated the Iraq War. The main justifications were Iraq's alleged possession of weapons of mass destruction and its purported ties to terrorists. However, these claims later proved to be unsubstantiated, stirring controversy and widespread protests. The Iraq War was marked by major battles, such as the Second Battle of Fallujah and the capture of Saddam Hussein, Iraq's then president. However, the war also led to a power vacuum, sectarian violence, and the emergence of ISIS, a radical jihadist group. The outcomes of the U.S. involvement in Afghanistan and Iraq were far-reaching and complex. The wars resulted in significant loss of life, displacement of people, and immense economic costs. They also shaped the global perception of the United States and influenced its foreign policy. Despite the formal end of combat operations, the U.S. continues to grapple with the aftermath of these conflicts. The long-term impacts of these wars, including on veterans and local populations, are still being understood and addressed today. As we approach the present day, the U.S. remains involved in multiple overseas conflicts. In the late 2000s to the present day, the U.S. has been involved in conflicts in Libya, Syria, and against ISIS. Let's start with Libya. In 2011, a civil war broke out in the aftermath of the Arab Spring, leading to the fall of Muammar Gaddafi's 40-year regime. The U.S., along with NATO allies, intervened to protect civilians from Gaddafi's forces. This intervention was not without controversy, as it led to a power vacuum and ongoing instability in Libya, which remains a concern today. Moving on to Syria, the situation gets even more complicated. A civil war erupted in 2011 as part of the wider Arab Spring. The U.S. initially provided non-lethal aid to rebels, but by 2013 they were supplying weapons. The goal was to pressure Syrian President Bashar al-Assad to step down. However, the rise of extremist groups like ISIS complicated matters, leading to a multifaceted conflict with no easy solutions. To this day, the Syrian civil war remains one of the most devastating conflicts of the 21st century. Speaking of ISIS, let's delve into that chapter. The Islamic State of Iraq and Syria, or ISIS, emerged in 2013. The group quickly gained territory in Iraq and Syria, declaring a caliphate in 2014. The U.S. led an international coalition to counter ISIS, conducting airstrikes and supporting local forces on the ground. By 2019, ISIS had lost most of its territory, but the group remains a significant security threat worldwide. These conflicts highlight the complexity of U.S. involvement in the Middle East and North Africa. The U.S. has navigated a maze of alliances and interests, often with mixed results. These interventions have had profound effects on the regions, the global balance of power, and the lives of millions of people. And that brings us to the present day, as we continue to monitor the U.S.'s involvement in global conflicts. Now that we've taken this historical journey, what does it all mean? As we look back at the past 4 decades, we see a consistent pattern of United States involvement in global conflicts. From the failed Operation Eagle Claw in Iran to the ongoing fight against ISIS, the U.S. has continuously been a key player on the global military stage. These involvements have not been without reason. Each engagement was driven by a unique set of circumstances, whether it was to protect American citizens, defend democratic values, or combat terrorism. The motives were often complex, interlacing political, economic, and humanitarian considerations. However, the impacts of these involvements have been profound and far-reaching. For the United States, the cost has been astronomical, not just in financial terms, but also in the lives of servicemen and women. The physical and psychological toll on veterans and their families is a significant part of this narrative that can't be overlooked. On the other end, The countries where these conflicts took place have also experienced significant transformations. Some nations, like Bosnia and Panama, have seen relative stability and progress in the aftermath. However, others, like Afghanistan and Iraq, continue to grapple with the fallout, dealing with political instability, economic hardship, and humanitarian crises. Furthermore, the global perception of the United States has undeniably been shaped by these involvements. In some quarters, the U.S. is seen as a defender of freedom and democracy, while in others, it's viewed as an aggressor and a meddler in international affairs. Throughout these years, we've also seen a shift in the nature of warfare itself. Traditional battlegrounds have given way to cyber warfare and drone strikes, indicating an evolving landscape that poses new challenges for global peace and security. As we look towards the future, we can only hope for peace and diplomacy to prevail over war and conflict. No matter the reasons or the outcomes, the costs of war are immense. As history continues to unfold, may we learn from our past, strive for peace, and work tirelessly to prevent unnecessary conflict and loss. In conclusion, the U.S.'s involvement in wars since 1980 has been both varied and significant. We've seen how the 80s began with operations like Eagle Claw, Grenada, and Panama, each with their unique challenges and outcomes. As we moved into the 90s, we saw the Gulf War, Somalia, and Bosnia, where the stakes were incredibly high and the world watched on. In the early 2000s, the focus shifted to Afghanistan and Iraq, marking a new era of warfare. And most recently, from the late 2000s to the present, we've witnessed the U.S.'s involvement in Libya, Syria, and the fight against ISIS. Each conflict has its reasons, its complexities, and its outcomes, shaping not only the United States but also the world at large. This retrospective journey is a reminder of the intricate web of international relations and the recurrent theme of conflict. Thank you for joining us on this historical journey. Stay curious and keep questioning.